Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to College Football Predictions Week. This is something new that we are implementing here on the channel every week. Before the start of the season or so, week 0 is upon us. We are going to predict every single conference team record in 2024. All of the Power 4 conferences is what we are doing this week. So, if you guys are into prediction weeks, hit that subscribe button. We are locked in. It is game week here on the channel. On Friday, we will be talking week 0 predictions, and we will be going over those games as well. But first, of course, if you guys are new to the channel, obviously you know what to do. Be sure to like, subscribe, and turn that bell on as we do our best to post on this channel every single day. This is going to be a pre-recorded video just because I'm going to be very slammed Wednesday. I was slammed on Monday. This is coming out on Tuesday morning early because you guys are going to get like 4 different videos today alone. Tomorrow, you guys are going to have an interview with Auburn commit Jacoby Ward. We are also going to play our Baylor Bears Dynasty tomorrow on the channel. So, stick around for that one as well. But it is predictions week. Let's go ahead and hop into this as we look at every team's predicted record by me in 2024. Alright, here we are. How we're going to do this is we're going to go by team in each conference every single day. So starting today, of course, by the title you saw, it is Big 12 team record predictions. We are going to start this video off with the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Stillwater's a tough place to play, man. I think if they can pull out a couple of wins that aren't really on everyone's radar, they're going to be looking really good, especially setting themselves up next year for the playoffs. So, with that being said, their first game is against South Dakota State at home. You get that win. That is also against the FCS champions, might I add. It's going to be tough, but I think you will get that win at home. Then you host Arkansas. I think that's going to be a win. I talk about them, so that's one of their SEC predictions. That is coming on Thursday of this week. At Tulsa, you get that win versus Utah. You host them at home. You take that L there. At Kansas State, you're going to take the L there. Kansas State, really solid all around, and I'll talk about them when it comes time. But then you come back home and you host West Virginia. You get that dub. You go to BYU. I think you welcome them with a conference victory, so you get the win over BYU on the road. Then you go towards Baylor on the road as well. Arizona State, you get the win there. At TCU, I know I'm wearing the shirt, but you do get the win at TCU. And then you come home and then play Texas Tech at home, and then you get the win. Then you go to Colorado as your final game of the year, and you take the L in Boulder. I just think that stadium's going to be rocking for that game. That is a rivalry prediction. Their final record overall is going to be 8-4, and they will, of course, make a bowl game. So, yeah, man, that is Oklahoma State's record predictions in 2024. Let's talk BYU. We're just going to go straight on through with this one. Let's talk the BYU Cougars here as they start the season out with Southern Illinois, man. They're going to get a dub there at home. It's plain and simple. You go on the road to a newly ACC team in SMU. I think you get the win on the road against SMU. You go to Wyoming where Josh Allen used to play his college ball. You get a win there. Then you have Kansas State. Again, Kansas State's going to be one of those really, really good teams in the Big 12 as you take the L there. Then you go to Baylor. I just think that Big 12, this is their first year in the Big 12. I think that you're going to take the L at Baylor as well. You go to Arizona. They're going to be a tough one. That's an L for them. Then you come back. Obviously, you go on the road, or you host Oklahoma State. I've said it. That's going to be a loss for them. At UCF, I think will be a win. Versus Utah will definitely be an L. Versus Kansas is going to be a loss. And then at Arizona State is going to be a W. And then, of course, your final game is going to be versus Houston at home. And I think you will end that one off as a dub with the final record of the season, 6-5. Good enough for a ball game for them, especially their being in their first year in the Big 12. It's definitely going to be a challenge, but they will get the job done. Moving on, of course, is Colorado, man. What is Colorado going to be in 2024? Obviously, Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter in the college football video game. That place is, I don't know what it is, but they like to worship Colorado. So, moving on, what is Colorado going to be in 2024? Here we go. We start off versus North Dakota State. That is going to be a win. You go to Nebraska and Dylan Raiola. That is going to be a very fun matchup in Week 2. I think you get the dub, but it will be close, and I can definitely see Nebraska sneaking that win out, which we'll talk about tomorrow. At Colorado State is going to be a win. Versus Baylor is going to be a win as well. At UCF, on the road, you get the win. Versus K-State, again, that's a loss for me in my book. At Arizona, that's going to be a loss for me in my book. Versus Cincinnati, I think you get the win. At Texas Tech, you get the win. Versus Utah, that's going to be a loss. And then at Kansas is a loss as well. And then versus Oklahoma is going to be a loss as well. So, again, final record, 7-5. Not the worst not the worst, but definitely not the best either. So Colorado, you will get a bowl game in 2024, I believe. Moving on is, of course, the team that we ended off with, Texas Tech University. What are they going to be in 2024? Well, you play host to ACU, which I've never heard of them, so that's going to be a win. At Washington State, you get a win there. Versus North Texas, you get a win there. Versus Arizona State, that's going to be a sneaky one, but you get the win there. Versus Cincinnati, you get that win. At Arizona, that's going to be a loss. At Baylor is going to be a loss. At TCU, I think you survived that one, but it is going to be a close game, so that's going to be a win. At Iowa State, that is going to be a loss. Versus Colorado, that's a loss. Versus Oklahoma State, that is a loss. And then versus West Virginia, that is going to be a W to close out their season with a final record of 8-6. That is a pretty good record for me in my book, especially in the Big 12. So moving on is the Cincinnati Bearcats. Where are they going to be after, of course, making the college football playoff in 2019? But they are looking to bounce back. First, you got to win at home against Towson with the W. Versus Pittsburgh, that's going to be a W. At Miami, Ohio, that's going to be a W. Versus Houston, that's going to be a loss. At Texas Tech, that is also going to be a loss as well. At UCF is going to be a W. Versus Arizona State is going to be a W. At Colorado is going to be a loss. Versus West Virginia is a W. At Iowa State is a W. And then you close out the season with at Kansas State. That's going to be a loss. And then your final game of the year is that TCU Horned Frogs. That is going to be a W. With, again, another final record of 8-4. It is going to be a wild ride for Cincinnati fans, but I do think that they, of course, will get the job done and get a bowl game there. Now, Utah. What is Utah looking like this year? Obviously, Cam Rising, I believe, was hurt all of last season, so he is looking fresh and ready to go for this year. But what are they going to be Big 12 conference-wise? Let's talk about it for right now. Obviously, again, you got speedy wide receivers on that offensive side. The defensive line for Utah is going to be really good. Starting out with a win against Southern Utah in my book. Then you go versus Baylor. That's going to be a win easily. At Utah State, that is a win. At Oklahoma State and Ollie Gordon, that is a W. Versus Arizona, that's going to be a W as well. At Arizona State is a W. Versus TCU is a W. At Houston, that's a win. Versus BYU, that's a win. At Colorado, that's going to be a win, but it's going to be very close. And then to close out the year, you have at UCF, that is a win as well. Yeah, you saw that right. I think Utah is going to go 11-0 in this conference schedule. They have the players to do it. They have the personnel to do it. Now let's see if they can put that all together and win themselves a Big 12 championship. Moving on is Kansas State. What are they going to look like, especially after last year's Sugar Bowl appearance? We are going to talk about that one as well. Versus UT Martin to open the series, that's going to be a W. At Tulane, that's going to be a W as well. Versus Arizona, that's going to be a win. At BYU, that is a win. Versus Oklahoma State, that's a loss. At Colorado, that is a W. At West Virginia, that's a dub. Versus Kansas is a win. At Houston, that's going to be a win. Versus Arizona State, that's a win. At Cincy is going to be a win. And then at Iowa State is a W to close out their record of a regular season record of 11-1 and in their hopes of making the Big 12 title game. So, yeah, I'm very high on Kansas State, as you guys can tell. Obviously, no Deuce Vaughn this year, so he's going to be, obviously, an issue right there. But I think they got the guys to fill that role and to fill more roles on the offensive side of the ball as well. It's all going to be about Kansas State's defense in this conference as well. Which concludes with my next team is the Arizona Wildcats versus New Mexico. I think that's a win in Week 0, so that's a game we will talk about on Friday. Stay tuned on that one. Versus Northern Arizona, that's going to be a win as well. At Kansas State, that's a loss. At Utah, that's a loss. So 2 back-to-back losses right there. Versus Texas Tech is a W. At BYU is a win. Versus Colorado, that's going to be a win. Versus Arizona, West Virginia, excuse me, that's going to be a win. At TCU is a win. Versus Houston, that's a dub. At TCU, that's going to be a win. And then versus Arizona State to close out the year with a win, with a final record of 10-2 for the Arizona Wildcats. Not enough to make the Big 12 championship game, but it is definitely going to be enough to make themselves a bowl game and possibly even the college football playoff. Now, Baylor Bears. The Baylor Bears, the team that I am rebuilding right now in college football 25. What are they going to be in 2024? There's a couple of games here that I think they're going to sneak out with the dub. Starting off with Tarleton State. Never heard of them. That's going to be a win. At Utah, that's going to be a loss for them as well. Versus Air Force, that's a win. At Colorado, you take the L there. Versus BYU, that's a win. At Iowa State, that's going to be a win right there. At Texas Tech, that's going to be a dub. Versus Oklahoma State, that's going to be a loss. Versus TCU, that is going to be a win right there. At West Virginia, that's a W. At Houston is a win. And then versus Kansas, that is going to be a loss right there. With a final record of 8-4 to close out the year. That's a pretty solid start without Matt Rhule and your number one coach. But, hey, who am I to judge? I'm just picking these games. Let's move on to the Houston Cougars of the Big 12 Conference. You start off the year, with a win against UNLV. Then you go to Oklahoma in what's going to be a really tough road test. That's going to be a loss right there. Versus Rice, you take the win. At Cincinnati, you get the win. Versus Iowa State, you get the win. At TCU, that's going to be a loss right there. Versus Baylor, that's going to be a loss. At BYU is a loss with a final record of 8-4. Or 4-8, excuse me. Not a great start for Houston in the Big 12, but hey, it is what it is. They will definitely get better. Moving on is the Arizona State. So, what are they going to look like in 2024? Well, you start off at home against Wyoming with the win. Then you host Mississippi State out of the SEC. I think Mississippi State is going to take that L on the road at Arizona State and get the win there against Mississippi State. At Texas State, that's going to be a win. At Texas Tech, that's going to be a loss. Versus Kansas, that's going to be a loss. At Utah is a loss. At Cincinnati, it's going to be a loss as well. At Oklahoma State is a loss. Versus UCF, that's going to be a win. At Kansas State is a loss. At BYU is a loss. And then at Arizona with a final record of 4-8. They're going to be one of the worst teams in the Big 12 right there. And then, moving on, you got the team whose shirt I'm wearing, the gear I'm representing this video. Again, going to be a little bit longer than normal, but that's okay because we're talking college football all day, every day this week. Let's hop back into it with the TCU Horned Frogs, obviously coming off of the national championship appearance a couple of years ago. So they are looking to get back in it, but what are they going to look like in 2024? Well, at Stanford, that's going to be a loss right there. Versus LIU, that's going to be a win. Then you host UCF. I think that will be a win. At SMU, I think you'll sneak out of that one with the dub. At Kansas, that's going to be a loss. Versus Houston, that's going to be a W. At Utah, that's going to be a loss. Versus Texas Tech, that's a loss. And then at Baylor, that's a loss. Versus Oklahoma State, that is going to be a loss right there. Versus Arizona is a loss. And then at Cincinnati, you will take the L on that one, with the final record being 4-8 on the year. Moving on to the Kansas Jayhawks of the Big 12. What are they going to be in 2024? Obviously, they are starting off the year ranked in the preseason top 25, which is great for them. But what are they going to look like in 2024? Well, you start off with a win versus Lindenwood, wherever that is, as a W. At Illinois, that's going to be a W. Versus UNLV, that's a W. At West Virginia, that's going to be a win. Versus TCU, that's going to be a win. At Arizona State is a win. Versus Houston, that's going to be a win. At Kansas State, that's going to be a loss. Versus Iowa State, that's going to be a win. At BYU is a dub. Versus Colorado is a dub. And then at Baylor to close out the year, you get the win to have their final record as 11-1 to close out the year. I said it right there, man. They got the players on offense to do it. Let's just see how they do it in the regular season and if their coaching staff can get them to the next level. Now, moving on to the UCF Knights. What are they looking like? Gus Malzahn entering his first year in the Big 12. Let's see what they look like in 2024 versus what I predicted them. Which, you start out with the win versus New Hampshire at home. Versus Ham Houston, that's going to be at home. That's a W. At TCU, that's a loss. Versus Colorado, that's a loss. At Florida, that is going to be a loss right there. Versus Cincinnati, that's a loss. At Iowa State, that's a win. Versus BYU, that's a loss. Versus Arizona, that's a loss. At West Virginia, that's a W. At Utah, that's going to be a win with a final record of 4-7. I don't think they're going to be very good for their first year in the Big 12, but we will have to wait and see on that one as well. Then you have West Virginia. What are they going to be in 2024? Well, you start out versus Penn State. That's going to be a loss right there in the end. So versus Albany, you come home and you get the win. At Pittsburgh, you get the win right there. Versus Kansas, that's a loss. At Oklahoma State, that is a loss. Versus Iowa State, that's a win. Versus Kansas State, that's a loss. At Arizona, that's a loss. At Cincinnati, that is going to be an L. Versus Baylor, that's going to be a loss right there. Versus UCF, that's a loss. And then at Texas Tech to close out the year with a loss with a final record of 2-10. And then the last team that we got to go over in this new conference realignment with the Big 12. Sorry for the long video, but it is what it is. Iowa State, what are they looking like in 2024? Probably one of the most uncertainties of 2024 in this Big 12 conference, with starting out with the win against North Dakota at home. That's going to be a dub. At Iowa, that's going to be a loss. Versus Arkansas State, that's going to be a win, but could be sneaky. At Houston, that's going to be a loss. Versus Baylor, that's going to be a loss. At West Virginia, that's a loss. Versus UCF, that is a loss. Versus Texas Tech, that's going to be a loss. At Kansas is a loss. Versus Cincinnati, that's a loss. At Utah's a L. And then versus Kansas State is a loss with a final record of 2-10. Now, Big 12 title game in the 2024. Who's it going to be? Well, I have it being Kansas State with an 11-1 record here. And then Kansas with an 11-1 record here as well. Like I said, I am high on the Kansas State Wildcats. I think they're going to win the Big 12 and go on to the college football playoffs. That is my Big 12 conference record predictions. Let's go ahead and close out this video. Anyway, of course, that is where I'm going to cut it for today's video. Once again, like, subscribe, turn that bell on. We do our best to post on the channel every single day. So, with that being said, you already know what to do. Thank you all so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys later for another pre-recorded video today, which should be another predictions video. So if you guys like this sort of content, you already know, again, what to do. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.